Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is in India on a 3-day visit. While the Twitter friendship between Abe and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is fairly steady, is it time to take that relationship to another level and talk about money? India needs more investments from Asia's second largest economy. It can also use Japan's expertise in technology and infrastructure to develop cities. There has been some good news in the last few days. On Thursday, the Modi government cleared a $14.7 billion Japanese proposal to build India's first bullet train line. Joining me on the program today to talk about this is Professor S.T. Muni, foreign affairs expert, K.P. Nayar, consulting editor of the Telegraph, and we'll also be joined by a couple of other guests later on in the program. So I'll introduce them as and when they join the program. Professor Muni, I'd like to start with you. What can we expect really from this 3-day visit of the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to India?
You see, this relationship is building up for last many years, at least 9 years. There are 3 major issues on the agenda. One is the civil nuclear thing. Second is this bullet train, which you just now mentioned, that is infrastructure. And the third is actually the Japanese want to sell something to us. And that is the seaplane, the US seaplanes. I think these 3 are high on the agenda. But on the whole, I may submit that there are 2 major Asian developments which are pushing these 2 very important Asian countries together. One is, of course, China's rise, but not only rise, assertion and a bit of aggressiveness in Asia Pacific and others. And the second is the US pivot. And both these are pushing India and Japan much closer strategically. So besides the economic agenda, is a major strategic agenda. And you would recall that when Prime Minister Modi visited Japan first time, he did mention that the old colonial mindset should be set aside. He did not name any country, but reference was obvious. And today in Global Times, there is a very interesting analysis which says that Japan is pulling India more towards it in order to contain and counter China. And India is maintaining a balance that it doesn't want to. But that's probably what the Chinese would want to see out of this relationship. But they are very closely watching how this strategic and economic relationship emerges. There are economic needs for Japan. There are economic needs for India. You mentioned very rightly. But the Japanese also, they lost a fast train contract in Indonesia to the Chinese.
Yes, they did.
And they are looking for a market because they were the pioneer in the fast trains. The Chinese have caught up with them. Therefore, Japanese are also looking for a market, and where else except in India that they can find better opportunities.
We'll talk about the Chinese angle a little later in the program because we need to analyze that completely as well because it's very crucial and very important. But Mr. Nayar, very interestingly, Professor Muni spoke about how, this friendship has been going on for a long time now. And we've seen that on Twitter, we've seen that on social media where both prime ministers have been, complimenting each other. And, we've seen a sense of bromance between the 2 prime ministers. But is it now time to take that friendship to the next level?
India's relations with Japan has always been trouble-free, tension-free. But the relationship was, for decades, dominated by ODA, Overseas Development Assistance. Today, it is changing in the background of 3 factors. One is, of course, India has overtaken China in terms of growth as an economy and is now the fastest growing economy in the world. Second is it coincides with Japan's return to brisk economic activity. The economic crisis that Japan faced, that is by and large behind the country now. So a combination of India displacing China in terms of growth, combined with Japan's return to brisk economic activity, augurs very well for a fundamental change in our relationship with Japan and going beyond overseas development assistance into other areas. Secondly, China is turning westwards, you know. I mean, they're concentrating, unlike they never did before, on the Gulf, on West Asia, in terms of their investments in setting up production facilities and things like that. Whereas India is going the other way. India's look east policy has become the act east policy. So these two things augur very well for a new phase of the relationship. And a third element, and a very significant element, is that Prime Minister Abe has brought about changes in Japanese law, which allows Japan to be a normal country for the first time after the Second World War, you know,
yes,
in terms of defense activity and all that, which also coincides with India's own efforts to expand its defense production, look for new parameters in terms of defense cooperation and partnership. So that is the background in which this visit has to be seen.
Indeed, that is the background that this visit needs to be seen in. But, you know, let's talk about some causes of concerns. And joining me on the program right now is Senior Editor of the Economic Times, Himangshu as well. Thank you so much, Himangshu, for being with us. Causes for concern: trade between the two countries in 2014 was at 16.31 billion, down by 12% from the previous fiscal. Is that a major cause for concern?
Well, I would call it a great opportunity. You know, if you look at Japan's imports, exports, and foreign investment, it is a single-digit percentage that India accounts for. So, you know, there's phenomenal scope, and that's one of the reasons I think Japan is pretty excited about its partnership with India. You know, India desperately needs infrastructure, it needs technology, skills, and all of that Japan has to offer. Plus, you know, their Prime Minister and India's, they made a very good beginning in their previous meetings. And what many people are saying, describing this as whether the handshake now becomes a hug or not, or whether a flirtation becomes a romance or not. So, you know, this could be a major step forward. You know, it's already been reported that very likely the first bullet train project is going to Japan. You know, they're involved in Delhi-Mumbai freight corridor being built. They are looking for a place to invest. They have a good name in India. You know, they built one of the bridges across the Yamuna in Delhi. Their technological image, you know, even when India was not trying to make in India or ease of business, you know, Suzuki is one of the torchbearers of what Japanese technology and partnership can do. So I'm coming back to your question, whether that low trade is a concern. I would say no. I think it's a huge opportunity. And, you know, you put that in the geopolitical context, which the previous speaker also mentioned. You know, Japan and India sharing a common concern about China. Both have very good relationship with the US. India might even buy defense equipment, the amphibious aircraft they're talking about, which, you know, would be its first defense export ever. So, I mean, all in all, I think there's huge warmth, huge opportunity. I think it completely outweighs the concerns.
You know, talking about flirtation, I saw a very interesting, you know, headline in one of the newspapers or one of the foreign media, you know, that spoke about Shinzo Abe and Narendra Modi's flirting needs to move to the next level. Do you agree with that, Professor Muni?
Well, I think, you know, the expressions like flirting and romance are very expressive and suggested, but it all matches on terms of relations. Look, I mean, civil nuclear issue, we have been talking for such a long time. The Japanese have their own concerns. We have our own concerns. Trade, which was mentioned, Japan-India trade is 5% of Japan-China trade.
Yes, yes.
I mean, which is pathetic in a way. And in terms of, you know, the requirements on each other, you still don't see much of a demand for the Japanese products, except technology and investment. Therefore, technology investment is one sector of economic partnership. Trade is quite another different matter, and it promotes each other, but it has not done. Japan-India relationship was reasonably cold, I would say about 15 years earlier, or until the Indo-US relationship warmed up. Japan was one of the major ODA suppliers to us, but nothing beyond. Therefore, there have been reasons, and I think, whether it really becomes a hug or a romance, we should all look forward to.
Yes,
but
we should
at the
look
same
forward to,
time,
because there's a lot of potential there.
tremendous potential. In fact, Abe has been saying it. He's the one who said India's relationship with India is most potential to us. And Mr. Modi's tweets very clearly explain that, yes, we are looking towards each other with many hopes. But, unless the national interests really converge, and let us hope they will converge, and click with each other on small little matters, defense matters also. I mean, we have hesitations on the kind of planes, not hesitations, but qualifications, but, calculations or whatever else it is. It moves very slowly. And whether it will take the fast track remains to be seen.
Yes, Mr. Nayar.
A lot is said about Prime Minister Modi's flirtation with Japan going back to the time when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. But we shouldn't forget that Prime Minister Abe has had a lifelong flirtation with India, His grandfather, Mr. Kishi, was the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit India after the Second World War in 1957. And Abe has acknowledged in public many times the stories he heard about India from his grandfather. So India, a kind of an Indophilism is sort of inbuilt in him, And when he was cabinet secretary earlier, the equivalent of what is our cabinet secretary, he came here on a visit. And we were able to see at that time that this man has a political future, that he may become Prime Minister one day. So although he was only the rank of Cabinet Secretary, he was given a meeting with the Prime Minister, Mohan Singh,
Is all of this going to make the Chinese uncomfortable? Are we going to see a new axis, Japan, India, US axis now?
I don't think we should bring China into every aspect of our foreign relations, That actually diminishes us. I think we shouldn't be unduly defensive about China. We should look in terms of where we stand independently in terms of our bilateral relationship, And in this context, irrespective of what China may or may not feel, you see, Japan wants to get involved in the Malabar exercises, for example. And India and the US they have invited Japan to join, And it's quite likely that the next Malabar exercise will see Japan as well. Similarly, for the first time in September, in New York, the first the trilateral took place, foreign ministers, India, Japan, US. See, we forget that long ago, Vajpayee government's time, the first RIC meeting took place similarly in New York, Russia, India, China. And although everybody credits Goldman Sachs with the term BRICS, actually RIC is the beginning of what is now BRICS, So little steps will lead, I think, to a very dynamic relationship, and bringing China in actually diminishes the potential and the future of this relationship. The India-Japan relationship should be able to stand on its own.
Let's see if Professor Muni agrees with you or not. Professor Muni, should China be left out?
I said very clearly, and I stick to my point, that China is a factor. Strategic concerns are vital concerns. Economic relationships shape up by these strategic considerations in one way or the other. And both Japan and India have their concern. And as I said, if US pivot would not be there. All these trilateral relationship, which...
So is there a new axis? Is there a new axis that's going to be formed?
No, I wouldn't call it axis. I would not go, because, that would... I'll tell you one thing. The Japanese have undercurrent of, lack of confidence whether US would be able to come totally to their defense.
Indeed. That's a fair point.
That is one of the factors why they want to build up with India in view of what is happening in Asia vis-a-vis China.
Indeed.
So we simply cannot ignore this.
Okay, let's bring in Mohan Guruswamy, senior economist, into the picture as well. He's now joining us on the program. Mr. Guruswamy, thank you for joining us on the program. You know, tremendous potential is something that we are discussing here. The third biggest economy in Asia and the second biggest economy in Asia, Japan and India. This particular meeting over 3 days has got tremendous potential. But, you know, somewhere something more needs to be done. You know, as far as FDI is concerned, Japan's FDI in India, I'm just talking about a couple of causes of concerns here. FDI in 2008 was close to $6 billion. 2014, it has come down to below $2 billion. Now, is that another cause for concern, do you think?
It is cause for concern because that's not because there's no demand for FDI and there's no opportunity for FDI. It's just that our processes are much too slow, much too cumbersome, much too bureaucratic. We have 80 hurdles to cross before in the bureaucratic labyrinth before you can set up a factory. So, you know, these are all problems which foreign companies face. Last year, Japan invested $32 billion in China, and we've invested $2 billion in India. And China is the country they're supposed to be antagonistic with, and India is the country they're hoping to forge a new relationship with. So that figures speak for themselves. There is an interest in both in China and in Japan or in India because India is the market with the potential. You see, China has reached a stable population. It's stabilized at 1.3 billion. India is the one which is going to grow, and we're going to see the biggest expansion of the middle class in the history of the world in India in the next 3 decades. We're going to add 180 million people to the middle class, which means 900 million people, their aspirations, their demand for goods have to be met. And for that you need capital, you need investment, you need companies to come and create those markets and, you know, develop those markets. And where will the world get its next $10 trillion GDP jump from? It has to come from India.
Indeed.
And so, which is why the Chinese and Japanese are interested in India, not for any other altruism. And I don't think, you know, this geopolitical angle really comes into it. It's a question of economic survival for both of them.
It's a question of economic survival. You know, something that the Japanese ambassador to India, Takeshi Yagi, said, you know, he said that firms in India face a series of problems on customs, taxation and infrastructure. So is India a tough country to do business in, Himangshu?
Well, compared to China and other countries, certainly. I don't think
India
there's any...
is an impossible country to do business with. There are far too many hurdles.
Okay.
Like I said, the bureaucratic labyrinth has 80 steps to cross. And it takes 183 days to get a power connection.
So it's true, there are lots of difficulties. But I think the current Indian government has been able to make a dent in persuading potential investors that serious efforts are being done. And that, I think, is very important to the extent some of these hurdles can be removed. You know, the way foreign companies and countries look at the Indian economy, that, you know, apart from the global factors, downturn in, you know, Western economies and various things which are shaping up global rates, India is one country, because of its own self-inflicted problems, there's a lot of potential to unleash a lot of economic activity if these hurdles are removed. So at a time where global economy is not doing too well, and some people say 2016 is going to be even worse, the attractiveness of India, that, you know, you don't have to depend on something external to happen or global environment to happen, if you can remove some of these hurdles, which are very, very removable. That is something where I think Japan sees a lot of potential, because nowhere else in the world is there such a demand engine growing. So many, you know, millions of people in the middle class. You know, India has this problem of, you know, Delhi has a problem of now you're talking of odd numbered cars and even numbered cars. Why? Because so many people have the money to buy cars. So, you know, this is the most exciting market which is untapped by many countries. There are these hurdles, but they are removable. So there is a lot of attraction there. And you know, Japanese companies, they have been talking of a lot of hurdles. If you ask a Japanese company, they'll probably say it's much easier to do business in China than in India. But if you look at their penetration, you know, if you look at the automobile sector, it's not just Suzuki and Maruti, you know, even Toyota, Honda, so many companies are doing well. Their two-wheelers are doing well. So they have learned the way to move around these hurdles, negotiate them. They don't like it, but this market is so attractive. So And that's why this attraction, when the Japanese Prime Minister, when he went on to Twitter, one of the first people he followed was the Indian Prime Minister.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Before I come back to, I think Mr. Guruswamy wants to make a point because he's been saying something. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Guruswamy.
You see, the fact is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. The Japanese are invested heavily in China. Bilateral trade with China is $340 billion a year. It's not even $60 billion a year. So, this whole thing is unreal. Now, if we clear up our hurdles, our bureaucracy gets energized, not only will Japanese and Chinese FDI come to India, but it will also energize Indian FDI, Indian money which is sitting abroad. Even today 60% of our FDI comes from Mauritius and Singapore. It will energize that FDI to come back to India. The fact is that the biggest share of FDI always are non-resident Indians or non-resident Chinese. It's the same in China too. So you got to get this money back. We are net exporters of capital. Last year we exported $51 billion worth of capital. A lot of that money can come back if we make ourselves attractive. The point is that, the ease of doing business since last year has just moved up 4 points. We were 134, we were 130 now.
Right.
At this pace, you can't attract foreign investment. You got to do something big soon.
Professor Muni, we need to do something big. We need to attract more people. Do you see that happening?
No, that's true. I mean, I have no quarrel with Mohan's and his arguments about reforms not taking place, bureaucracy not working, hurdles not being removed in order to facilitate economic relationship. What I'm partly amazed is that you see geostrategic factor of no significance. I cannot accept that. Why I cannot accept? Because Mr. Abe raised the question of confluence of two seas. Obviously, we indication towards the strategic aspect. He's the one who went on emphasizing Indo-Pacific concept as it is. Not only that, even as a use of soft power, both India and Japan have been emphasizing of late two factors which are very vital. Emphasis on democracy and emphasis on use of religion, both Hindu and Buddhism. We recently had a conference here in Delhi, and I understand the idea of that conference was prompted by Mr. Abe. Now, this is where you see that there is a convergence of strategic... Just a minute. There is a convergence of geostrategic and economic interest. While we understand the vitality of the economic relationship, without strategic convergence, we were a big potential earlier. I said 20 years earlier, Japanese did not look at India as a potential market. In 1999, they became so angry with us on the nuclear issue. Now, to say that all this is not relevant surprises me a bit.
Okay, yes, Mr. Guruswamy, make your point. And then I'll go back to my other guests as well because we are running out of time on the program.
Democracy and Buddhism, lack of it in China didn't stop the Japanese from going and investing there. Now, as far as geopolitics are concerned, with the new levels of technology in the world, with the way we are strung out, this is nice to be talking to each other about strategic relationship, but nothing is going to happen. If something happens on our northern borders, you think Japanese are going to come into our help? Or the Americans are going to come to our help. So, we are in it for ourselves and should be by ourselves. If anything else comes, it's a bonus, but we can't forge these relationships on paper and say that this is this great grand design to contain China. It's not going to happen.
I'll have to wrap up the show, but before that, Mr. Nayar, I'm going to give you the last word on the program.
You see, Japanese don't get into anything without planning. And if you look at the sectors they are concentrating on, you can see how much planning has gone into it. For example, they are solidly behind Prime Minister Modi's Swachh Bharat campaign, the campaign for building toilets. It's partly trying to help on a social plane, but it's also because Japanese have the biggest bathroom equipment manufacturing company in the world. And if this toilet building program gets off in a big way, Indians, after all, India has the largest number of people who defecate in the open. So can you imagine the amount of business that will come to Japanese companies if this gets off the ground? Similarly, we proposed a partnership between Kyoto and
Varanasi.
Varanasi.
Yes.
See, the,
Kashi.
yes, Varanasi, right? So, the Japanese have expanded it to include Sarnath also,
Yes.
you see. So, the amount of planning that the Japanese put into this relationship, they are investing into this. If we respond proportionately, I think this is a relationship that can thrive.
It's a relationship that can thrive. It's a relationship that has tremendous potential. Let's hope that, we see some kind of forward movement and we can see
But it's
the
a
relationship
relationship that's
being
making
taken
us
to the
cry
next
now.
level. Mr. Guruswamy,
Nothing is
completely out of
happening
time, so I'm not going to let you have the last say on the program. Professor S.D. Muni, KP, Nayar, Himangshu Vats and Mohan Guruswamy, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on the program. And thank you so much for putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching as well.